Welcome to Beyond the Book with Julie, a chance for inspiration and insight from the author. Today, we meet Eve Rodsky. Eve Rodsky, so good to be with her today. Eve went to the University of Michigan and then law school at Harvard. She worked in foundation management at JP Morgan. She founded the Philanthropy Advisory Group to advise families and charitable foundations. Eve has worked with hundreds of families in mediation, strategy, and organizational management. Eve was raised by a single mother in New York City and now lives in Los Angeles with her husband and 3 kids. Eve wrote Fair Play, a game-changing solution for when you have too much to do and more life to live. The book was featured in Reese Witherspoon's book club, and I love that her seal is on there. That's great. Eve, so many questions for you, but number one, we just came off of Mother's Day yesterday. Tell us how your Mother's Day was, and if you truly didn't have to pick up a finger doing a dish or laundry or cooking at all.
Nothing. I did nothing, but that didn't start like that, Julie. This started with, as you read in Fair Play, right, with a husband who expected me to buy his blueberries and be the fulfiller of his smoothie needs. Yes, and now we are 8 years later, and I spent the day alone. I had the best day ever. I read about 8 books. I took a nap, and I didn't see anybody. I did re-enter my family life to watch the Michael Jordan documentary, but I wasn't in charge of my toddler when she was interrupting. So it was a pretty amazing day.
Hold on. So you basically took the day off. You went out on your own and enjoyed yourself. Now,
I walked in my neighborhood. I came through the back. I was in my room. Yeah, I didn't see anybody all day.
Okay, so I have had visions of doing that on Mother's Day because in my mind, that would be the best Mother's Day. Not to have the expectations of anyone and to just do me and to be by myself. But there's a lot of guilt for me that goes with that. Like, well, Mother's Day is supposed to be a day that you're supposed to be with your kids and together. And how is that celebrating if I just go off by myself? So how did you come to terms with that?
Well, I think I talk a lot about in Fair Play, the permission to be unavailable. I think right now when sort of the space-time continuum is collapsing on all of us, but especially women with 70 articles, Julie, that have come out since March 8th that say women are continuing to do 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family. The more women are paid, the more work that they have to do. Actually. So it's a very strange dichotomy there. So what I look at is the permission to be unavailable. We can do that in very unhealthy ways. I interviewed 500 men and women that mirrored the U.S. Census. Some ways men and women were unavailable to each other were reaching out to ex-boyfriends and girlfriends on Facebook or other unhelpful relationship moves. Or your permission to be unavailable is to create those boundaries for yourself. But that requires really intentional communication. And that's really what all Fair Play is about. It's about how do you get to that intentional communication so that you can, especially as women, we can ask for what we need.
And so you said earlier that there was a time when your husband had a lot of expectations for you. So, and you talk a lot in the book about communication and about, him coming 50% and helping out. But really tell us, like, how does that work? How do you get him to buy in? What do you have to do? Like, do you, how many meals do you have to cook for him and talk him through it and pet him to get him to that point?
None, because what this is all about is it's a complete reshift in how you communicate. And so I think there's 3 steps, Julie, I like to talk about in Fair Play. But step number 1 in my, sort of reset of your communication strategy has to do with recognizing you're already communicating. So I had so many women say to me, I would do this, but I can't implement Fair Play. I can't really bring the cards or anything to my partner because it's too triggering. He won't do it. He thinks things are great the way they are. What I want to say to anybody who says that, whether it's man or woman, hetero, cisgender relationship, same-sex relationship, is that we are already communicating about domestic life. One woman, Julie, said to me that, you know, she can't communicate about domestic life. It's too triggering. But then I found out, she told me that she dumps wet clothes on her husband's pillow when he forgets to put them in the dryer. Another woman told me that she started an Instagram account called The Shit My Husband Doesn't Pick Up. And she publicly shames him on Instagram. I reached out to a woman in a COVID group who said, a 27,000 member COVID group who said, if my husband dies during COVID, it's not from the disease, it's from me. But she told me she doesn't communicate on domestic life, but she's willing to publicly threaten murder of him on a 27,000 member forum. So what I'm here to say to all your viewers is we are already communicating about domestic life. So once people understand that what I'm asking for is a communication shift, not a communication start, then a lot more people are willing to come to the table to say, okay, I'm ready for a shift. I'm ready to have my expectations managed, more efficiency in the home, way better, less resentment, less nagging, whatever you want to call it. But that's really what step number one is, Julie. It's recognizing you're already communicating.
Okay, and then when you do get him to the table to talk about the fact that you have these needs, you need this unicorn space, which we'll get to in a minute, and by him meeting you halfway, everyone will be happier. How does he really buy in? I mean, because we have these conversations all the time, but it's like kind of in one ear and out the other. It works out for a few days and then it's like out the window again.
Well, it's probably because it's a version of a list, right? So what I learned very, quickly in sort of the 8 years of research for Fair Play was that, Fair Play started as a should I do spreadsheet. The best spreadsheet, Julie, that you've ever seen in your life, 98 tabs. I sent it off to Seth one day, the 19 million megabyte spreadsheet with the subject line, can't wait to discuss. And as you can imagine, right, I get just like that one sad monkey, the monkey that's covering its eyes, the see no evil monkey. And that was it, right? So I had to decide after making the most amazing 9-month spreadsheet, the Should I Do spreadsheet with women all over this country who were sourcing what they did with their time that took more than 2 minutes, which included making dentist appointments, Girl Scout cookies, ordering in sales, making school lunches, whatever it was, right? What happened when I sent that to Seth was, and I got that sad monkey emoji where he didn't want to discuss this issue, was that lists alone don't work. So what does work is what we do in the workplace, which is treat our home as our most important organization. And I've never seen a man in a hetero cisgender relationship when you are approaching the conversation the right way and say, I want more efficiency in my home. I want us to be real team members. I want to redefine teamwork for efficiency and for happiness and for less nagging and less decision fatigue. I've never seen a man reject that conversation. But oftentimes it's that we're not doing the work on ourselves. And we have our own communication vulnerabilities that we have to deal with first. And mine is bad timing and toxic tone. And so when I come to the table, when emotion is high and cognition is low, nothing's going to get done. And then the third rule, right? So you have to recognize you're already communicating. You have to recognize that when emotion is high, cognition is low, and no one can hear you. And the third step is you have to invest in fair play or your communication like a practice. Nobody thinks of communication like a practice. As a mediator, I'll tell you it's the most important way to think about communication. People think of communication as I have one, we need to talk conversation, and then we never have to talk again. But just like meditation, just like exercise, communication is a practice. It is the best practice you'll ever invest in your life. And so what Seth and I do is we set a timer and we check in every single night. Every night since COVID has started, we set a timer for 10 minutes. Sometimes it's 15 and we'll go over with either tequila or ice cream and cookie dough. We talk, we connect every single night. And that comes from the workplace, Julie. What they've shown now is the new type of feedback for employees when you're a good manager is intentional communication on a very, very frequent basis so that your employees are not scared to come to you with real important questions or really important issues. This idea of feedback once a year, it just doesn't work. So you have to invest in a practice. So that's what I would say is that nobody has come to me and said, I talk to my husband every single night. We invest in a check-in for 10 to 15 minutes a night and things aren't working. It just doesn't work. It works. The investment and the communication works.
So it's number one is communication. The communication, I mean, you have some other things before that, but communication is really high there.
It's everything.
Talk about the 100 cards of fair play. And I saw online, I mean, do you actually sell a deck of these cards now?
Yeah, well, they're going to be coming out in September, which is really exciting. We have some, I'll send you some, Julie. We have some still from promotion. So if anybody wants to DM me, I still have a few sets left from the book tour. But yeah, I'm really excited for them to come out. There is a full deck of cards. And I think the thing is, if you use the cards, though, Julie, like a list, then it's just not going to work, right? Like I said to you before, I made the most beautiful lists in the world, the Should I Do spreadsheet, and it didn't work. You throw a card at somebody, one of the 100 cards, right, is garbage. One is laundry. One is dishes. These are not rocket science. Everybody knows the domestic tasks in their house. Maybe they're not named, and that's the beauty of having cards, is they sort of serve as a couples therapist, but a lot cheaper.
Right.
Because you can say, I didn't say this. This is the cards. Like, oh, thank you notes. So
you
do you want to keep
card.
it in or throw it out? Right? This is the cards are a mediation tool. But what they do is they allow you to have a conversation about what you value together. So again, if you use it as a list, like you have to do thank you notes, it's not going to work. What you do is you build your deck together. So that's what I want to say to everyone here is that if you go on fairplaylife.com, you'll see what I call the Dirty Dozen Bingo. It's a top 12 cards right now that couples are telling me are causing the biggest problems in their household. And COVID. And you can imagine what they are, right? Their dishes and their laundry and their homeschooling and their screen time for your kids and garbage. There's a lot of the repetitive daily tasks. But if you think you're just going to sort of say, like, you take dishes, again, you're not going to be able to get there without lots of reminders and lots of nagging. What you start with is, I want to come to the table with this card deck and say, what do we value together? Let's build our deck together. You don't even have to hand out the cards. Just live with the understanding that to have it all doesn't mean doing it all. And what can you get rid of right now? And what are the things that are really important for you? Some cards are non-negotiable, like you have to put meals on the table. If you don't feed your children, then unfortunately, Child Protective Services will probably show up. At some point, you're going to want to take your garbage out unless you want to live like a hoarder. So some of the cards are ones that, have to be done. But I'll give you an example. So it's all about ownership, right? So fair play is all about ownership. That just like in the workplace, Julie, I would never come to you and say, hey, what should I be doing today? I'll just wait here till you tell me what to do.
But husbands do that.
They do. That's my point. You never do that in the workplace, but that is exactly how the home works. We're not treating our home like our most important organization. But most hetero cisgender men have the amazing ability to understand the idea of ownership, the idea of context, not control. They do it with their employees. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. So think about mustard, right? Think about, how did your mustard get into your refrigerator? Well, someone, Julie, had to know that your second son, Johnny, likes French's yellow mustard on his protein. Otherwise, he chokes. He won't eat it. Sorry, someone just called me. So I was saying, so in the business world, we call that conception. The knowing that your second son, Johnny, likes French's yellow mustard. Then someone has to monitor that mustard for when it's running low and put it on a grocery list along with everything else you need for the week. That in organizational management is what we call planning. And finally, someone has to get their butt to the store to purchase the French's yellow mustard. Now, obviously in gloves and masks, and it's more of a pain in the ass. And then in organizational management is what we call execution. Now, my core finding of fair play, Julie, was that, especially in hetero-cisgender relationships, men step in at that phase, at the execution phase. And it's a real problem because they're bringing home spicy Dijon every frickin' time. And I asked you for French's Yellow, and don't you know that Johnny likes French's Yellow mustard?
Right.
Haven't you been
And
sitting
it's
at
in our
table?
fridge every other day.
Exactly. So it becomes less about mustard and more about trust and accountability. And what happens when you start losing that trust and accountability in your partner? Well, what happens is that 30% of people divorce over the smallest details in the home, like bringing home a spicy Dijon when you ask for French's Yellow. So the only solution is the same way that the workplace deals with it, which is you keep the conception, planning, and execution together. When you hold a fair play card, you hold it from start to finish, from curiosity to completion. You own the full mustard situation. You have groceries this week. You're the one surveying the household for what they need. You're surveying whoever's cooking the meals for what they need. And you're going to the store with that full context. That is basically the core concept of fair play. We treat our home like we treat our workplace.
But again, in that example, that seems really hard. You know, I mean, I don't know, maybe the cards work a little more magically, but when I've tried to say like, okay, you will go to the market and you will manage the dinner and you can talk to the kids and you can make those decisions and whatever you decide to put on the table is totally fine. It still comes back at, well, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to get?
Are you checking in every night? Are you checking in every week or every night? Have you entered a system, or you're just saying one day, hey, I think we should handle dinner? It doesn't work as a list. That's a list. This is a system. This is coming to the table
every night. So this is truly like meditation or working out. This is
meditation. This is working out. It used to be a weekly. See, now Seth and I don't really check in. We check in with frequency now because of COVID. But actually, for a while, we were just doing a weekly check-in on Fridays, and that lasted us for the week. That's 15-minute investment. Women are telling me that they're investing more time in procuring toilet paper than they are in their relationships. So I'd like to say to everybody out there, invest in your relationships like you're investing in toilet paper. I had a woman saying, I don't want to do a 10-minute check-in every night. It's too much time. So this is before COVID. I grabbed her phone. I went straight to her screen time app. And I found out that she'd been on Instagram for 4 hours and 15 minutes. So, okay, you want to make your leisure time nutritious. That's what my professor, Laurie Santos, says, who I love, who's a psychologist of happiness at Yale. Make your leisure time nutritious. And part of that is, instead of scrolling 4 hours on Instagram, take that 10 minutes to invest in your relationship. It is a completely new way of looking at things. You say, I'm investing in 3 things, Seth. My health during COVID. So I'm going to exercise 20 minutes a day. My self-care, I'm going to read a book, if I can, for 10 minutes a day, but also I want to invest in our relationship. I want us to come together every night to check in, to connect, to see what's working, what's not working. And we do that by we build what's important together. And you have to start with your values. So again, these are completely different new communication techniques. Not, you fucking handle dinner or set the table when you're hangry and cranky, right? It's saying, what's happening this week? Here's the cards that you're holding. For me, it just started with garbage and extracurricular sports for Seth. Once he understood that garbage meant getting the bins out, putting the liner back in, he understood that. But Julie, I was still his garbage shadow. I still stalked him over garbage. I'd walk around the kitchen, seeing if he was taking out the garbage. And he noticed that tension. And he said, I'm not going to do this if you're my garbage shadow. So what Fair Play asks you to do is you sit down with the cards to discuss your why. Why do you care about something? So even though Seth and I had been together a decade, he didn't know that I didn't have a garbage can growing up. He didn't know that my mother just had a takeout bag and a knob and that garbage would spill out. And we had a huge cockroach and water bug problem in my house. But once I was able to say to him, I don't think you know this about me, that I was 7 years old as a latchkey kid, stepping over garbage, trying to get a glass of water through hundreds of cockroaches and water bugs. I have a really hard time seeing garbage. And then Seth was able to say to me, I grew up with a housekeeper. I slept on Domino's pizza boxes. I really don't give a shit about garbage. So what happens though, right, Julie, when we're so divergent over something that has to get done every day? Well, again, 30% of people divorce over these issues. But what Seth was able to say to me was, I understand you care about garbage. I'm willing to own garbage. But it has to be a minimum standard of care that we can both agree on. I'm not going to take garbage out every hour. It'll go out once a day at night. I'll put it in my calendar like a work appointment, as long as you never mention garbage again. I will carry through my mistake. If the bins don't get out there, that's my problem, not yours. And it was a miracle, Julie. It was the first time in my life that I didn't have to remind my husband to do anything. It was like Moses parting the Red Sea. Garbage went out every single night and still does.
That is incredible. So it goes back to communication.
It's all entering, and people are scared of systems. They're scared of systems because it sounds overwhelming, but all a system is, and I will say this to your listeners, to your viewers, is that all systems are a way to get to clearly defined expectations. That's it. Even my Aunt Marion's Mahjong group, they have more clearly defined expectations than most homes. You don't bring snack twice to the group and you're out. So why should Aunt Marion's Mahjong group have more clearly defined expectations in the home? It doesn't make any sense because our home is our most important organization. And it requires some respect and some rigor. But we have to devote as much time to our home as we are to meditation, or as we are to finding toilet paper.
Right. It's actually much more important. Okay, and let's
more of a shit show.
Let's touch on reclaiming your unicorn space and why unicorn space is so important and why you call it unicorn space.
Well, the scientific term is really eudaimonic well-being, so I thought unicorn space was a nicer term for it. I call it unicorn space because it's like a mythical equine, Julie. It doesn't fucking exist unless women are willing to reclaim it. Especially now that space and time is collapsing on us. This idea of find your passion and purpose, I used to hear all that, and it felt very shaming to me. I think without the context of domestic rebalance, I wasn't finding my passion and purpose. I was barely trying to hold on. And so what I realized is that while I used to hate the find your passion and purpose language, this idea of eudaimonia, of unicorn space, is the most important thing for our mental and physical health. And what that is the active pursuit of what makes you you. So Julie, it's this for you. I mean, I'm assuming it is because you're bringing your beautiful voice and your love of books in such a unique way to the world. And that is needed. Whether, it's one person who sees and says, I'm, and going to start investing in reading again because they saw you, or a million people. It is your love and how you bring that to the world. That is unicorn space. So while I love eating pies, that's self-care, but the active pursuit of what makes you you, baking a pie, is unicorn space. One woman told me she just signed up. Her unicorn space is the volunteer firefighters. She just signed up for her volunteer firefighters organization, and they're doing all this PPE stuff in her neighborhood in Canaan, New York, upstate. It could be, I have one woman who sent me a picture of herself knitting, crocheting Harry Potter dolls. I had one man who sent me his ham radio. He's a scientific engineer. He's now competing in ham radio competitions against these huge engineers. And he's just a hobbyist and he's winning these competitions. So mine was the gender division of labor, the curiosity about what was happening to my life, why I didn't have the fair partnership I thought I was going to have, that I vowed I was going to have. So whatever your unicorn space is, and it can change, and sometimes it does change. Right. It is something that's the active pursuit of what makes you you, and how do you share that with the world?
Right. And it ignites you. You feel passionate, for lack of a better word, right? It excites you and it motivates you, and it's why you're here, really.
It's essentially why you're here, and especially during this crisis, I think it's really important for two reasons. One, it gives you the permission to be unavailable in a constructive way. So as I write my second book, I say to Seth, I need 3 hours to write, And so those will be your 3 hours of watching our kids, and then we can switch. But that's my unicorn space. It gives you permission to be unavailable. I need 3 hours to build my Lego model. It allows you to have, I need 3 hours to train for my triathlon. But the beauty is in you both taking it. Because what I think the real midlife crisis is, it's not the breast implants or the green Ferrari. It's that we resent this time of our partners. And oftentimes it's women resenting men because men take twice as much leisure time as women. Many men told me that they became triathletes after their first kid was born. And I said, I totally get it. I know you want to escape. I want to escape too. But if there's not fairness in your unicorn space, there's a lot of resentment. So it's about saying to each other, I want to invest in your happiness. And I don't want that to be an affair or you reaching out to old boyfriends on Facebook, which so many women admitted to doing. I want it to be constructive unavailability. And that really is this idea of unicorn space. What makes to you and how do you share with the world?
Before COVID, I think for many of us, our sort of space away, our time alone was to get out of the house. So we didn't hear anyone and nobody could call on us. Now Correct. That is much harder. I mean, I'm definitely starting to jog and get out a lot more on walks because it's like the only place to go. But for you, when you take those 3 hours, and I know you're writing a book, how do you go somewhere where no one else will find you, bother you, or that you'll hear them?
Well, that's a great question. And again, this is all about boundaries. So I don't really care if it's your bathroom or your closet, or literally anywhere. Under your covers. But it's about those expectations. So if you just say, "Stay the fuck away from me," right? That tone is not going to work. It's going to make everybody angry and mad. That's my typical tone before fair play. But it's about saying in advance, right? Like what I was able to ask Seth is we talked 2 weeks in advance. I said, Mother's Day is coming up in 14 days. On Mother's Day, I don't want to see anybody. So whether you have to keep the kids downstairs, literally take them on walks for 8 hours, I really don't care. I just ask that you feed them and that they're not on screens for 9 hours. That's my minimum standard of care. And that happened. But it's because we pre-negotiated that. We had those clearly defined expectations 2 weeks in advance during our nightly check-in. And again, that's the beauty of the repetitive check-ins, right? It allows you to ask for things that you may not even thought you could ask for. I had one woman say to me that she divorced her husband because it was easier for her to ask for a divorce than it was for her to ask for time and space in her home. And that made me so sad. So I like to think of fair play as divorce for married people. Right. It allows for you to ask for what you need, but to stay in your relationship.
That's incredible. I think we all need that, especially with COVID. So this book, I know this book came out before COVID, but it's definitely needs to be put in play right this minute.
I'll send you the cards, Julie. And again, I'd say start where you are. Even if it's I spoke to this author today and she suggests 10 minutes a night with a timer, just to look at each other. You don't have to implement the system or do anything yet. Just say, we want to start the practice of a 10-minute check-in where we set a timer, where we look in each other's eyes before we watch TV or go on our iPads or check Instagram, whatever we're doing, just to connect. Just to say, like, what worked for you today? What didn't work for you today? What was stressful today? Where were you on your cycle of emotions today? Were you grief? Were you sad? Were you happy? Were you feeling peaceful? Where were you? Get into that practice of that check-in where you look in each other's eyes for just 10 minutes, set that timer. And that way your practice becomes communicating when emotion is low and cognition is high.
Very, very good advice. Thank you so much. I'll be checking in with you soon to let you know how that goes.
Yes. And make sure you email me your address so I can send you the card.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Julie.
Great to be with you. Take care. Bye. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thanks for joining us. Follow at Facebook, Instagram, and our website, Beyond the Book with Julie.